So as you know, the Bible starts with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God hovered on the face of the deep. And then the third verse says, God said, let there be light, and there was light. That's in direct opposition to what many in the world believe. The Bible starts off with this idea of a divine being that creates the world that we live in fact, the entire universe. The stars, the sun, the moon, every animal, every plant, every fish, every bird, every insect, God created all of those. The Bible is firm in its understanding, in its telling of that fact. And that's one of the reasons we have Genesis chapter 1, because it says God in the beginning created these things. The world, on the other hand, believes that 4.5 billion years ago, the earth was formed. And as the earth cooled, I don't know, somehow the water didn't boil off and all that water was created. And out of the water, out of the primordial ooze, they say, life came. Whether it was, the stuff was there and it was struck by lightning, and then all of a sudden we have a protein that's created. And then they believe that single cell somehow divided and survived and became other cells, and eventually it became the first protozoa, or the first sea creature. And then that sea creature came out, and one of them eventually figured out how to get out on land. And that's what they believe. And they believe that it took millions and millions and billions of years. And one of the things that they point to, and I started this last week and I kind of rushed through it, so I want to just hit it again, is this idea of uniformitarianism. And it's a long word, but if you think about what it's saying, I'll put the slide back up as soon as I get this back on. And as soon as I get focus, I have to have focus here. So it's defined right there. The principle that states that geographic processes or geologic processes happened in the past can be explained by current geographic processes. Seems like that should be geologic. So basically what they're saying is, if you look around, we can see here, you can see that we can see water erosion and how water erosion affects things. In my garden, I put in this new watering system. And you know what happens when you leave your water on in your garden and you forget to turn it off? You get all these little rivers and they carve out these little valleys, and that's water erosion. And we see that all over the world. We see what water does. It erodes the earth. We see that. You can see what happens with wind. If you've ever been to southern Utah, you can see the arches and stuff like those are supposed to be caused by wind, where the wind is coming through and it's hitting the dust particles are hitting the softer parts of the earth, and they carve it out and they make these wonderful, beautiful carvings of earth. And it's really quite the masterpiece. Freezing and thawing. You've seen, I have one part of my sidewalk that's not level with the other part of the sidewalk anymore. It's because over time, the freezing and thawing has changed where that sidewalk is. It doesn't match up anymore. Chemical changes, glaciers, you can see all these. And this man named James Hutton said the present is the key to the past. In other words, we can look at all this stuff and we can see what happened in the past. And the idea that I tried to put out there is that they're all based on these ideas of what is called a cosmic clock. And a cosmic clock is, and I defined it as you can picture it in your mind, a cup pouring water into another cup at a specific rate of time. So you've got it. Let's say it's dropping 1 drip per second into the bottom cup, and you can measure that, and you've got a view of that. So if you walk in, and this is how cosmic clocks work, because I want to tell you that a cosmic clock starts way back here and comes out here. And what we're doing is we're looking at this little window of time in a cosmic clock. Think about that. We've been measuring the speed of light for how long? 200 years at the most. maybe 300. That's how long we've been measuring the speed of light. That's how long they figured out that they could measure the speed of light. And you know how they did it? They got it one place where they knew it was so far away from another place, and they shined a light. And they coordinated the clocks, and they figured out how long it took to go from one place to the other. Now, I'm not sure how they figured that out, because the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. But they measured the speed of light. I'm going to talk in just a little bit about the magnetism of the Earth. The Earth is a magnetic sphere. It's got this molten iron core that's spinning in the opposite direction of the mantle and all of that, and that creates magnetism. And it creates, in fact, a magnetic field that envelops the Earth and protects it from cosmic rays. Did you know that that's decaying? Did you know that over time it's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker? And eventually what's going to happen is that we're going to start getting more cosmic rays in the Earth. You can measure the amount of meteorites that fall every year. You can see how many are hitting the Earth and how many you can measure all of that. Now, what's the problem with a cosmic clock? And it really goes to, and I've got a really kind of funny saying, quote from Mark Twain on the next slide. The problem with a cosmic clock is that you can only view this window. You've only got a view in a cosmic clock of that window. You don't know, for instance, let's take the speed of light. The speed of light seems pretty constant right now, right? You don't know if the speed of light was a lot faster in the past. You don't know, in the example of the cup dripping water, while you were out of the room, whether someone added water to the bottom cup, whether they stopped and took a rest and didn't put any water from the top cup in the bottom cup, whether they sneezed and more water came out and went into the bottom cup. That's this idea on the left-hand side here called catastrophism. Volcanoes, floods, earthquakes, and stuff like that, they interrupt this idea of uniformitarianism. They interrupt that idea. And so what James Hutton is saying here is patently false, that the present is not really the key to the past. And the reason for that is because we can't know for certain that a cosmic clock, which is based on a constant, we can't know that constant remained constant throughout the entire time of the clock. Last week, Jake said that the Earth is slowing down. And you can measure the fact that the spin of the Earth is slowing down. And every 10 years, they have to adjust the clocks, the atomic clocks, by a second or two slower. Now, what does that mean? That means that you can measure how fast that goes. Now, have you ever spun a top? Got one of those tops with a string and spun it? You notice that it does. It's really fast at the beginning, and then it slows down. Is the rate of slowdown constant on one of those? In my way of just looking at it, no, it's not. Because when it starts getting slow, it really starts getting slow. And then it starts wobbling, and then it falls over. But what Jake's point is that if you take the constant of how the Earth is slowing down over the past, however many years that they've been measuring it, and extrapolate that into the past, then a couple million years ago, the Earth was spinning day and night, a second a day and night. Now, do you think the Earth was ever going that fast? I mean, I think we'd be flying off the Earth at that point, if we were here. But the point is that cosmic clocks, whether you believe in them from a evolutionary standard, or if you believe in them from a creationist standard, they all are dependent on the idea that there is a constant that is constant over time. And we've just not been here measuring those things long enough for us to know that that's true. So what's going to happen is that you'll read something, maybe like the amount of cosmic dust falling on the moon. That if we were here for 4.5 billion years, that it should be a lot deeper than it is. The only problem with that is that you don't know in the past whether whether we had cosmic dust here at all, or whether something happened where a lot of cosmic dust came in. We don't know the answer to that because we weren't here. And so when you get to this idea of uniformitarianism, is the present the key to the past? No, because you don't know what happened in the past that could have caused that model to have changed. And really, for instance, a worldwide flood. A worldwide flood would be a catastrophe. In fact, there might be actually two catastrophes that we might want to talk about. One of them that's hinted at in the Old Testament. The first one's the flood. The second one is the division of the people in the Tower of Babel. If you look at the words that they're using there, it suggests that God took something that was together and divided it, not just the languages. One of the people, his name is Peleg. He's the son of, I can't remember who he's the son of, but his name literally means to divide by canals. And if something like that may have happened in when you were having a child, you might have named him, Continental Drift or something like that, which is the suggestion. There are catastrophes that have happened, volcanoes that have happened that change all of this. I put this up here. And I mentioned, why is that not working for me? Did I not turn it on? Yeah. The geologic column. And you notice on the side here, it's got all of these, you may recognize Jurassic or Triassic. You might recognize Jurassic from the movies, right? That's when we had dinosaurs. Well, we had dinosaurs apparently in the Triassic and the Cretaceous and the Paleocene, the Eocene, and all of those scenes. That's called the geologic column. The problem with that is that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, right? There is no place, and you see man up there at the top, and I'm not sure what the squid in the back of the truck is doing, but or Nautilus or whatever that is. And I'm surely not sure why there's a pterodon or a pterodactyl that the guy is pointing at. Those don't exist right now as far as I know. But you've got this down at the bottom, Earth forms 4.6 billion, sorry, I was misquoting, it's 4.6 billion apparently, billion years ago. And then you're going up the layers. And the idea is that over time, that erosion and stuff just created all these layers. Where did that dirt come from, by the way? Where did that dirt come from? Was it just, the idea is with erosion is that it comes from the mountains and goes down. If we had that much erosion, we'd have no mountains at all. It'd be a flat earth. And that's a different story. But you've got all of these ages and stuff like this, and they've got these mapped out. And like I said, you won't find this anywhere. Now, if you do go look up geologic column, it's interesting. You go look at the Grand Canyon and stuff like that. They've got it. They've got layers and stuff, and they've got them named, and they're really cool and all of that. But the thing is that you don't know how those layers got there. And certainly, a flood could account for a lot of those layers. In fact, what happens is with this geologic column is that the layers often are in the wrong order. They go out and they find that the Jurassic is above the Eocene era or something like that. And how is that supposed to happen? The problem is that they don't take into account catastrophe like the flood and stuff like that. So when Mark Twain has a quote like this, and you can go back and read that. Mike's got a comment. When you go back and read this, what he's saying here is that he says, in the space of 176 years, the lower Mississippi has shortened itself 242 miles. And he's going to suggest that if it keeps up the same pace, what's going to happen is pretty soon you're going to be able to walk from New Orleans to Cairo. Where is Cairo? Do you know where Cairo is? Huh? Not that Cairo.
It's where the Missouri River goes into the Mississippi River.
So that's way up high. Yeah, thank you. It's in Missouri, so it's thousands of miles. What he's suggesting is that over time, if it keeps on going the way it is, and we can, that's projecting into the future, that's okay. But what happens is you forget that man has something to do with that too. Has man ever dredged the Mississippi River? Absolutely. They have, because they want to keep the traffic going on it. So, I mean, but extending that backwards is kind of funny. He says that the river was upwards of 1,300,000 miles long, which is more than the Earth several times, right? The Earth is 22,000 miles around or something like that. I mean, you can imagine that's how long the Mississippi River was. That's the point. That's why cosmic clocks don't work. That's why this whole idea of uniformitarianism doesn't work. Mike, you had a comment?
Yeah, two quick things. Been a while since I've looked at this. How do they determine, identify the layers like Jurassic? Is it by the fossils supposedly in them, or soil type, or what?
It's by the fossils that they find in it.
That's what I was thinking. And the
Right.
second thing is, I don't at all recall how deep those layers go. You have any idea numbers of feet or yards or something?
I don't know.
It's real a lot though, right?
But to fit a Tyrannosaurus Rex fossil and something like that, it'd have to be, big enough for the fossil, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and it's funny. Just a second, Don. But let's just say we're able to clone dinosaurs, like they do in Jurassic Park. Let's just say that they figured out a way to get dinosaur DNA out of mosquitoes that are embedded in amber. Is that really far-fetched? Yeah, kind of, sort of. But what happens if we did that? And like, there's the final movie is coming out. They're going to have dinosaurs all over the earth again. What does that do to their model of the present is the key to the past? I know it's fiction, but they have found dinosaurs in my lifetime. They found things. I've heard rumors of them hunting Brachiosaurus in the Congo and dying because they ate it, or I've heard stories like that my whole life. Are dinosaurs really gone, or have we just not found them all? It's an excellent question, I think, but really kind of apart from this. But Don, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, Cairo is actually in Illinois, at the bottom of the state of Illinois, where the Ohio River flows into the Mississippi River.
That's still 500, 600 miles away.
And you got to remember that Mark Twain was from Hannibal, Missouri, which was probably just across the river from that. So that's probably why he made reference to that city.
Yeah.
Just a little factoid there.
Yeah. So again, that's the reason that uniformitarianism doesn't work, is because we don't have the whole picture. What we do have is a message from God. And that message from God says, I created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and my spirit walked on the face of the deep, and I said, let there be light. That's what God told Moses, and Moses wrote that down. And so we have a firsthand account of what actually happened. And it's wonderful that we have that account, because we can depend on that. So now, my last point is that time is not the friend of an evolutionist. At the early 1900s, people thought that the earth was 6,000 to 7,000 years old. And then by the time Charles Darwin came on the scene and all, they thought it might be 100,000 years old, maybe 1 million years old. And now it's 4.6 billion years old. And do you know why it's 4.6 billion years old? Because you cannot account for evolution in 1 million years. It's just not possible. There is a man who was having a debate. His name was Thomas Huxley. He was having a debate with the Archbishop of, I don't know what, about evolution. Darwin's book had just been published 10 years before, and they were having a debate about creationism and evolution. And Thomas Huxley has famously said that if you put 6 monkeys in a room, and they had 6 eternal monkeys with 6 eternal typewriters with an eternal amount of ink and an eternal amount of paper, that eventually they could produce a sonnet or a psalm or a complete book. Now, I had thought it was the complete works of Shakespeare, but let's just think about that for a second. And really, the problem is that the Archbishop, I think he was the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was supposed to be a good mathematician, he didn't counter him. And so this statement became part of the idea that certainly evolution is possible, because if monkeys could type out a sonnet or a psalm, certainly you could combine DNA, or it could be randomly combined and create a creature. The only problem with that is it's not possible. Not with any stretch of the imagination. So I chose the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Now, if you're generous, you notice down here I've got an old-fashioned keyboard. The modern keyboards are called 101 keyboards. Do you know why they're called 101s? Because they have 101 key combinations on them. You know, with the function key and the alt key and the Windows key and all of that, they've got 101 keys. I'm being generous, and I'm suggesting a typewriter that only has uppercase, lowercase, space, and period. 54 characters. Now, the way that you find out whether or not, and so each character in Jesus wept, you have a 54 chance of getting that right. So in order to figure out how many times it would take to randomly type out Jesus wept, is 54 to the 11th power. And that number is represented there on the board. Now, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, quintillions. 11 quintillion. That's the odds of typing out Jesus wept. The psalm, what's my favorite psalm? Probably is Psalm 91, which has got a lot of lines in it. Let's take Psalm 23. Psalm 23 has 604 characters, punctuation, verse numbers, 600 spaces. You have to count the spaces, because if you type Jesus wept without the space, is it the same as typing Jesus wept? It absolutely is not. It is not. And that's what Huxley was saying, that you get enough monkeys in a room and they could type out a Shakespeare sonnet. So if you were going to, by the way, let's just say we're not cheating, and we count all the keys on the keyboard, and there are 88 of them, combinations, on an old style keyboard like this. That number is decidedly larger. Let's see, tens, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, quintillions, septillions. 2 septillion. By the way, do you know how many seconds there are in a year? No, I've got it in my notes. It's 130 some thousand. It's, no, I'm sorry, it's 31,536,000. Sorry, 31,536,000. It seems like a lot of seconds, doesn't it? So, Jesus wept. That many combinations, I think I have it in my notes how long that would be. It would take, tens, thousands, millions, but 77 trillion years to do. That's 11 letters. 77 trillion years to do. If you've got one monkey pressing one key per second in a room. Now, by the way, if you take that down if you have 6 monkeys doing the same thing, it really doesn't change the odds. And by the way, I want to let you know a secret. If the odds of winning the lottery are 1 in, say, 1 million, buying 10 tickets doesn't increase your odds 10 times. That's not the way that works mathematically. The number of 77, by the way, 77 trillion years. By the way, how many years old is the universe supposedly? No, that's the Earth. 15 billion years old for the universe itself. So just to randomly type out Jesus wept on an 88 key keyboard, and it's astronomical as to how long. If you tried out to, your son has a comment, by the way, Bill. If you tried to type out the Psalm 23, 604 characters. It's and the example I had is actually said. Do I have it on the screen? I do. No, that's what this is. It would be they're saying 50 characters, which is not right. It's 50, at least 54. 50 characters to the 1026 power. That's the way that it works out is billion times 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 billion times. It's like 100 times out to have if you divided it by billions. If you raise something to the 126th power, that number doesn't exist. I mean, it's so the odds of having something like that happen is impossible. This is impossible. That's why time is not the evolutionist friend. And that's why you'll find that they'll keep increasing that amount of time to account for it. And their answer to this is, well, it happened anyway. Sam.
I'm looking at Romans chapter 2 here. And this is a lot of cool science math, which I love, and stuff like that, that, these evolutionists do and other people do that are mathematicians and maybe Christian scientists, you could call them Christian scientists, or this is the math. This is the truth behind their trying to figure out if it's even possible.
Right.
And in Romans it says, everything is evident. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse.
Right.
They're trying to come up with all these excuses of like, oh, I have an excuse why God didn't create it. That's not possible. I'm going to invent evolution. I'm going to invent whatever scientific theory I can. But when God said, nope, do the math. What does the evidence show? Do you have an excuse? Does this leave room for an excuse?
Well, again, and I know Mike Franklin doesn't like the term blind faith, but George Wald said, I know that spontaneous generation is impossible, but here we are as a result, I believe, of spontaneous generation. He also said that I understand that we can't be here because of spontaneous generation, but because I don't believe in God, the only explanation is that we're here because of spontaneous generation. That's faith to me. Faith to me is thinking that, by the way, DNA is much more complex than Jesus wept. Much more complex than Jesus wept. And the idea that DNA could be randomly created, the numbers aren't even on the chart. That's how extreme that number is. And yet people, scientists, the men in the white coat, want to believe that it just randomly happened.
So another point on the same subject is that this is their excuse that they're trying to come up with. If you do the science, you do the math, it's impossible. Therefore, they're without excuse. God is also saying in these verses that it should be common sense that that there was a God that created what was made. And let's say we propose the question of what Mark Twain did. Well, if you have a monkey do this, he type for a long time, he can do it or whatever. God expects us to use our logic and our common sense, that we can do the math in our head and saying that's illogical and nonsensical. It should be evident by just looking out and seeing the creation. Of course, we can study it through science and become even more amazed by his creation and his power and his majesty, but it should be common sense.
I agree. By the way, I had to use a calculator to do this math. I'm not going to do that in my head. I think I've made that point. I want to go on just real quickly. These are what you're going to run up against when you're talking about theories of how we came to be. I don't believe that the top one is a theory. I believe we have an eyewitness account that God created it all in 6 days. There are some hybrids out there, the day-age theory and the gap theory, and they're called hybrids because they want to include long periods of time in the 6 days of creation, and we'll talk about those more closely as we go through. On the naturalistic side, you have evolution, and all of these are some type of form of evolution. You've got Darwinism and Neo-Darwinism. Darwinism was just survival of the fittest. Neo-Darwinism says, no, it really has to do with genetic modification and genetic manipulation. Panspermia is a fancy word for saying that life came here from another planet. In Bill's class on intelligent design, aliens did that. Aliens came and brought life with them. Most often scientists say, well, what happened is that a meteorite came and brought life with it, and it seeded the earth. Now, I don't know how that happens, but meteorites heat up quite a bit on the way in. How life could survive a meteorite coming down, I just don't know. So I like the alien thing. But what does that do, by the way? And why is it under evolution? It just kicks the can down the road. They're saying that evolution didn't happen here, it happened somewhere else in the universe. And the same logic that we applied to Jesus wept applies to the rest of the universe. If aliens brought life here, they would have had to have evolved somewhere, or God created them somewhere, but they would have had to have evolved as well. And so what panspermia does is it just kicks it down. Punctuated equilibrium, or the hopeful monster theory, is the idea that evolution has really struggled, and all of a sudden, boom, a chicken laid an egg, or an alligator laid an egg, and out came a chicken. That's that. Bill, you had a comment?
Yeah, just real quick on the aliens bringing life. That just makes the time issue harder.
Right.
Because not only did we have to have the time for life to evolve here, according to their theory, but that alien life had to go through the same system.
Yep.
And that's so how much more time is that, which of course, again, we've already proved is impossible, but it just makes it much worse, you need more time.
Yeah, you need more than 15 billion years to evolve like that. And the last one is this theistic evolution, which is not quite a hybrid from the standpoint is it's evolution, but God guided it. So 4.6 billion years old, the earth is, and when that primordial soup was there, God made sure that it had the right mixture, and the lightning struck it at just the right time, and voila, we have cells. And then God made sure that that cell was able to divide and eventually able to become a fish. And then God made sure that that fish was able to eventually develop lungs and be able to get onto land and evolve into an ape and evolve into mankind. And here we are, the pinnacle of evolution, because God guided it all. I have to tell you that is totally opposed to what the Bible teaches. Bill.
And it's not that God couldn't have done it that way if he chose to. That's not the question. It's not the way he said he did it. So
right, it's not what he said he did.
And that's the weight there. God could do anything any way he wants. They're suggesting that's the way he did it, but that's not the way God said he did it, nor the follow in Genesis and other books of the Bible.
Exactly. I mean, all throughout the Bible, it's clear that God said, "I created the earth," and the creative powers that he's talking about all throughout the Bible are not this slow, gradual, I guided evolution through it. The only reason for theistic evolution, and this is what John Paul II, Pope John Paul II was talking about in that quote that I talked about, is that they want to reconcile what science says is 4.6 billion years on the earth and what the Bible says that God created. And really what they're doing is they're discounting what God said about his own creation. So here's a list of some, take a picture of this if you want. These are older books. There are a lot newer books. I don't think I have Darwin's Black Box on here. I put the in the beginning one on the bottom. You can get that off the internet now. If you're interested, there are thousands of books about creationism, creation science. The Creation Museum has a ton of books on their website. You can Answers in Genesis. There's all sorts of stuff out there. There's an incredible amount of resources. We don't have to be bombarded. We don't have to have our faith even shaken at all by the idea that these people put forward. Again, the men in the lab coats. We don't have to be bothered by that, because we know what the Bible says is God's word, and there are a lot of books out there that would talk about that. I'm reading a book right now, and I don't know if I'll get to it in our class, but I'm reading a book right now called Starlight. I can't remember what the name of it is. I've got it in my notes. But it's a man who is trying to explain how we could have starlight here on the fourth day from stars that are billions of light years away. He's trying to explain it. And he's got a theory, and he's written it down, and it's interesting. It's kind of sciencey, but I prefer the layman's explanation of a lot of these things, because I'm not an astrophysicist or anything like that. But he's saying that the general theory of relativity can help explain why light from distant objects got here over billions of years when only 6 days passed on the Earth. And it's really an interesting book. All sorts of stuff. Anyway, Genesis chapter 1. Finally. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. This is how the Bible starts. I don't know if you've tried reading your Bible or not, trying to read it all through, but I have absolutely no trouble reading Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2. It is so wonderful. Amen. The prose that is given here, the way this is written, God saw the light that it was good, and he called the light day, and he called the darkness night, and it was the evening and morning of the first day. What an incredible way of saying it. And so God, we don't know, if he was the light, if he just created light itself. But what we see here, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We see a number of things. What can you get from that? What did God create from that? There are 5 things that you see in this verse alone that were created. Do you know what they are? Well, not stars yet. Those were created on the 4th day. How about space? How about matter? There was force involved. God created. How about time? In the beginning. What does that denote? So if I'm going to draw a timeline up here, I always draw this at the beginning of my timeline. I don't draw an arrow pointing backwards beyond that. In Genesis 1:1, there was no time before God said, "Let there be light." When God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, God created time as well. So we have time, we have space, we have matter, we have energy, we have force. Well, force and energy is the same thing. I think there's a 5th one that I've got in my notes here.
Did God create darkness before he created light?
I don't know, Don, did he?
Darkness just in,
Absence of light.
yeah.
Yeah. Don asked a great question, and I have absolutely no idea what the answer is. You know, and it's okay to not have an answer. We don't understand how God created all these things. There's a passage in the New Testament that says that in Jesus all things consist. It's like Jesus is holding all things together just by the power of his will. That and you know, this is just me talking, but you know, in the end, when Jesus, when it says in 2 Peter that it's going to end in fire, I just imagine that Jesus is going to let go all of those atomic bonds that he's holding together with his will. And what happens when you let go of an atomic bomb? Atomic bond between two molecules or two, you know, everything just blows up. That's how we split a hydrogen atom and we get a bomb, right? I can only imagine that that's how things are going to end. That's just my own weird thought on things. But we've got, I'm sorry, I missed a whole part of my notes here and I want to go back to it.
He said that there was void. Void means it's nothing, that would be darkness.
The earth was void. Yeah, it says the earth was void though, right? The earth was without form and void, and in that case it means the earth didn't have anything on it. It was just matter that he was going to manipulate. I don't know the answer to your question, Don. But I do want to step back. I do want to step back for just a second. We talked about the purpose of the book of Genesis. Now, I don't know when Genesis was written, although I can narrow it down to a 40-year period. Since I believe that Moses wrote the book of Genesis, in the first 40 years of his life, he was the prince of Egypt. In the second 40 years of his life, he was a shepherd in Midian. In the third 40 years of his life, God called him to lead his people out of Egypt. And that's when he wrote, we know, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. So it's Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, get them in the right order. So he had to have written Genesis in that time period. But why would he have written Genesis in the first place? And again, I think that he wrote Genesis not only for our benefit, but to let the Israelites know from which they came or from whence they came. To let them know that God chose Abraham. Out of all the people in the world, God chose one man, Abraham, to be the father of a nation that would eventually lead to Jesus Christ. And he chose Isaac. He gave a special child. He gave Isaac. He gave Jacob. He gave, Joseph and his brothers. And that's how they got into Egypt. But these first several chapters of the book of Genesis, what does it tell you about God? First of all, let me step back and say, where were the people of Israel at the time? They were in slavery. They were in Egypt. What were they surrounded by in Egypt? One of the most polytheistic cultures in the world. Everything had a god. The river had a god, the lake had a god, the sky had a god, the stars had a god, and whether it was Osiris or Ra or Hathor or Anubis or whoever, they were surrounded by gods. Gods of the sky, gods of the sea, all these gods. And then God through Moses said, no, you know what? I did all this myself. There's no father God, no mother God, that got together and created baby gods and all of that. I created the heaven and the earth. Genesis is God 101. It tells you that God is the master of the sky. God is the master of the seas. God is the master of the earth. God created all of these things. It's designed to tell the Israelites and us that God is in control, that God made all these things, that we can depend upon God because God is just that powerful. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they were familiar with all these gods, the Nile god, the god, the Osiris and Hathor and Ra, and they were familiar with all these gods. And God said, they're nothing. In fact, if you go back and look at the 10 plagues, each of those plagues is designed to knock down an Egyptian god. Ra was the god of sunlight. Was it the 9th plague or the 8th plague, which made it dark in Egypt for 3 days? Their god, Ra, had no power over the God who could actually make the sun dark for 3 days. The Nile, another god. God made that bleed. So the god of cattle, they couldn't protect their cattle from the murrain and all of that. So the book of Genesis, especially this part of it, is designed to let the people of Israel and let us know that God can do anything. A God that can speak the universe into existence can help you with your problems. Amen. A God that can divide the light and the darkness, who makes planets, who made our sun, can fix our lives. He can call us out of darkness. He can call us into his light. And so I believe that that's one of the functions of this book, and I've got it in my notes. I didn't want to forget it. But he's the master of the earth, the sky, seas, animals, and completely different than all of theirs. Okay, the first thing you'll notice here, I said, is that there was a beginning, that God created time, space, matter, force. There's motion, and prior to this, there was no space, time, or matter. There's a passage in Isaiah that I like to talk about when it talks about God, because if you're over here, and this is the beginning of time, where is God? He's over here, and he's over here. God is outside of time. To God, time is a tool. And we don't understand that because we're driven by time. We get up in the morning because our alarm clocks tell us to get up, or we arrive here at church, and I'm over time. Over time. There are two passages in Isaiah I want to get to next week, and we'll talk about this, that God is outside of time. And because God is outside of time, his predictive energy, he can see any place on the timeline. And eventually, by the way, and we don't know how long it is down here, there's going to be another one of these. And time is going to end. And we'll go off into eternity. And so, like I said, I'm out of time. We're going to look at these verses from Isaiah next week, where God shows that he is the one God because of how he can look down in time and tell a matter before it happens. So thank you for your time. But we'll get to this next week.